Today we're going over the basics and testing of a dual run capacitor. The dual run capacitor we're using today is a Titan HD 50 plus 7.5 MFD. The Titan capacitors are USA made. Capacitors are rated in microfarads or MFD. The unit of measurement for that is UF. We'll be using this throughout the rest of the video. The MFD rating, like I'd mentioned, for this capacitor is 50 UF, which would be for the compressor, or 7.5 UF, which would be for the condenser fan motor, plus or minus 5%. The voltage rating on a capacitor is the max voltage that a capacitor is able to handle. A general rule of thumb says you can replace a capacitor with a higher voltage rating, but you never want to replace a capacitor with a lower voltage rating. Most of the replacement capacitors I keep with me are rated for both 370 and 440 volt AC. Just to clarify the plus or minus 5%, even though the capacitor is rated at 50 and 7.5, it's allowed to be plus or minus 5% of that value. So 50 would mean that it could be as low as 47.5 UF or as high as 52.5 UF and still be considered a good capacitor. On the 7.5 UF, it would mean you can have 7.125 on the low or 7.875 on the high and have it still be considered a good capacitor. A dual run capacitor consists of three terminals on the top. One labeled C for common, one labeled Herm for hermetic, which means it's the compressor, and one labeled fan, which is for the condenser fan motor. If you have a capacitor where you're unable to see the markings on it, a tip is that a common will have 4 connectors on the top of it. A compressor or hermetic will have 3 connectors on the top of it, and a fan will have 2 connectors on the top of it. A safety tip before working with any capacitor is to make sure that it's discharged. The way you would do that is take your capacitor, find the common terminal, and what we're going to do is take an insulated handled screwdriver and short it between the common and the fan, and then the common and the Herm, to make sure that there's no built-up charge left inside of it. In this case, we had no charge. If you did, you'd get a little bit of a pop and a spark, and that would make sure that your capacitor is discharged. For testing purposes, you'll need a capacity checker or a multimeter with a built-in capacitance setting. This Fluke 902 HVAC Clamp Meter has a built-in capacitance setting. This capacitor has already been discharged. When reading a capacitor, polarity does not make a difference. Take one probe, put it on the common. We'll take the other probe, put it on the compressor terminal. We get 49.9, slightly less than the rating, but well within the 5% range. Next, we'll take the probe and shift it over to the condenser fan motor terminal, and we get 7.6, slightly more than the rating, but again, well within the 5%. That's all there is to it when it comes to testing a run capacitor. Hopefully this video was helpful.